If you live in the Northwest, last night's Capitol takeover looked pretty familiar. Because something like that happened here last month during Oregon's special session.
A serious breach of public trust.
And today we found out an Oregon legislator may have actually opened the door to let them in. And oh yeah, on top of that attempted insurrection, there's still a deadly pandemic happening. And while plenty of frontline workers have been waiting weeks for a vaccination, we'll tell you why some stay-at-home hospital employees nowhere near those front lines have already had theirs.
Actually quite a bit more widespread.
Here's the story.
Juicy one tonight, huh? Hey, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. Something tells me you have an opinion. Call me crazy. I don't know. Yeah, email us, thestory@kgw.com. You can find me on Facebook. Ask me your question. Make a comment. Actually call me crazy. Just don't forget to use that hashtag, HeyDan. Man, it's good to be back on TV. We didn't have a chance to go on air last night. NBC, they preempted The Story to stay on their coverage of the insurrection in D.C. and then eventually the final tally of the electoral votes. But I wanted to share some thoughts from the show that we planned to air and did eventually put online. Now, on top of last night being, I guess you probably agree, a terrifying moment in American history, it was also embarrassing. All day yesterday, the United States looked like the type of unstable country that our government's so swift to criticize and say, thank God we don't look like that. Well, take a look at some of these photos. We look unstable. We don't look any better. We didn't last night. There's another part of the story, another part of last night that really frustrated me, and it has to do with this number here, this one behind me, 3,964. That's how many new coronavirus deaths were reported across the United States yesterday. The same day pro-Trump extremists flooded the Capitol, it almost feels silly at this point to point out that how few of them, if any, were wearing masks. I think I saw more Viking hats than PPE. That said, we have heard from experts that big demonstrations, they haven't turned into super spreader events. I'm continuing to hope that they are right. But on top of being this anti-democratic display, it was a distraction at the worst possible time. People like me should be on your TVs and on your phones or wherever you watch us, helping to pressure our government on our coronavirus response, on getting vaccines in people's arms, not people in revolution cosplay terrorizing our seat of government. And don't worry, we're going to get to all that vaccine stuff a little later in the show, but not quite yet. Here's the big story. As easy as it is to dwell on those insane images from D.C., we shouldn't ignore what's happened right in our backyard. I mean, last night, police declared an unlawful assembly in Salem when a pro-Trump protest turned into a pro-Trump riot. And there were counter-demonstrators there, too, in the mix, and that never ends well. So far, police have made one arrest. There was also a moment up in Olympia, Washington, where a mob tried to smash their way into the governor's mansion. About 50 people got onto the property while Governor Inslee was there. He had to be taken away to a safe place. They all left after about 30 minutes. There were similar Capitol assaults in state capitals across America. Utah state legislators, they had to evacuate. A mob breached the Kansas State House. The Georgia Capitol, they went into lockdown. Someone set up a guillotine in front of the Arizona State Capitol. Seriously. There were more, but you get the point, I think. What's worse, I think, especially here at home, were the statesmen like Oregon State Senator Dallas Hurd, who not only joined in with this big group in Salem last night, but actually egged them on.
Democrat or anyone, senator, representative, mayor, county commissioner, if you're the enemy of the people, I am your enemy.
Enemies, yay, what? That's what he said while thousands of people stormed the U.S. Capitol on the other side of the country. And I might add, only a few weeks after a group stormed our Capitol. Remember this? In December, during the Oregon special session to pass COVID relief, a group of anti-lockdown rioters smashed their way into the Capitol, eventually getting in and gaining access. And today, Oregon House Speaker Tina Kotek says Oregon State Police is investigating whether a Republican member of the state legislature actually opened the door and let them in. She says Representative Mike Neerman from Independence may even face criminal charges here. Again, she's citing OSP in all of this, but OPB is reporting that security cameras caught Neerman in the act doing this. We reached out to his office, but they declined to comment. Speaker Kotek says that legislative leaders are reviewing possible disciplinary actions against Neerman now.
We have consulted employee services as well as the Legislative Equity Office about is this a hostile workplace violation? Should it go through the conduct committee? That's a potential. First, we've been waiting to give a little bit of space for the Oregon State Police to conduct their criminal investigation, because that is still an option.
Speaker Kotek adds state police are reviewing safety procedures at the Capitol right now. She says they may put in new security measures in place near the entrance and other key spots. Things are going to change there. But the Capitol will remain mostly closed for the time being to the public because of COVID. But underneath all of the violence and the chaos and insurrection, there is this feeling with some Black Lives Matter protesters in Portland that they would have been treated differently if it was them marching on the Capitol. Kyla Boshi talked to a local activist about what they see as a racist double standard.
As pro-Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol Wednesday by knocking down barriers, smashing windows, and ransacking congressional offices, Black Lives Matter activists wondered why law enforcement showed so much restraint compared to the heavy-handed tactics that officers used on them.
Demonstrators in Portland have been tear gassed, beaten by both local and federal troops. And so there's definitely a double standard. And I don't think had that been a mob of Black individuals that it would have played out the same way.
Specifically, activist Greg McKelvey points to the dozens of people who were roughed up and tear gassed by federal officers as they demonstrated for racial justice outside the federal courthouse in downtown Portland this summer.
I was one of the individuals that was tear gassed for simply being in that park.
This disparity between the police response to Black Lives Matter protests nationwide and the violence in Washington, D.C. was not lost on President-elect Joe Biden.
No one can tell me that if it had been a group of Black Lives Matter protesting yesterday, they wouldn't have been treated very, very differently.
Those people were protected. Their actions were protected, their safety.
Teresa Rayford, founder of Don't Shoot Portland, said images like these help solidify a long-held suspicion that conservative white protesters don't have to play by the same rules.
I mean, come on, what kind of savagery would be said about people like myself if we even went in there and wrote on a wall?
Rayford said the lack of police response to this violent mob shows a racial double standard.
You've seen here in Portland where we might have an event scheduled for 11 o'clock, but there's riot cops there at 10:30.
Black Lives Matter protesters and civic leaders not only denounced police for taking little action, but also President Trump, whose rhetoric they say helped fuel the violence. Kyla Boshi, KGW News.
Look, I think the discussion around race and rights should be a part of all of this, but it's only an element of a very complex discussion that needs to happen in this country. I made a point last night in our digital show to discourage people who want to compare what we saw in D.C., apples to apples, with the violence we've seen from the radical left in this country over the last 7 months or so. And I think it is reasonable to assume police would prepare for unrest before a BLM protest or an Antifa rally, because we have seen them regularly escalate to violence and vandalism in cities around the country through all of that time. And while we have seen violence from Trump supporters as well, of course, it has been more sporadic. But what we saw in D.C. was an anti-democratic attack on a fair election, an attempt to stop a peaceful transfer of power from a single group in support of a single person, President Trump, a sitting president who has exploited misinformation to accuse our system of being rigged against him and any American who voted for him. Those people stormed and occupied the U.S. Capitol based on that misinformation, or by exploiting it themselves for their own means. And let's not forget that someone did get shot and killed by Capitol Police. Now, have we seen people exploit peaceful BLM marches and turn them into violent riots? Yeah. People who just want to tear down the system or abolish police or abolish prisons? Yes, we have. But there is a key difference. BLM is fighting for something good: racial equality, progress, moving this country forward, not undermining the pillars of our democracy. And they have no singular leader guiding them. That said, we can't ignore this rising element of extremism in this country and the violent means our society seems to accept based on their ideology, based on what you agree with. I talked to sociologist Randy Blazak about how this type of thinking and behavior on either side can actually fuel each other.
It's a dangerous game because what we started to see yesterday, shortly after the takeover in the Capitol, or the incursion into the Capitol, is those activists saying, well, in Portland they did it, and everybody was seen to be, saviors and heroes, and so why are we any different? And they sort of play this sort of equivalency game that violence on their side justifies violence on our side, and we've certainly seen that start to happen. We've seen the social media chatter on the right actually look at some of the tactics on the left as ways to engage.
Now, something that undoubtedly fueled at least parts of this mob that stormed the Capitol was conspiracy theories. For years, online extremists and conspiracy theorists have been calling for something just like this to happen, most prominently QAnon. And we've talked about them on this show before. And we saw QAnon supporters storming the Capitol yesterday. See the guy's shirt right there with the big Q. The woman who was shot and killed by police was a Q conspiracy theorist, according to some of her social media posts. Now, Oregon's most prominent, maybe we should say, QAnon believer was also at the Capitol yesterday. You remember Jo Rae Perkins? She was the Republican nominee to challenge Senator Jeff Merkley in November. She posted a Facebook video last night from a hotel room talking about what she saw at the Capitol. Perkins wasn't elected to Congress. She lost. But another QAnon believer was. Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia was sworn in just a few days ago. And that means that QAnon's reach has actually spread formally into our federal government. Let's take a look at how they've moved from an online fringe group to something much more dangerous.
It's easy to write off QAnon as some wacky conspiracy theory, but it's become widespread and in some cases dangerous, with the FBI classifying it as a domestic terrorism threat. But how did we get here? The precursor to QAnon was Pizzagate in 2016. That led to an armed man shooting inside of a pizza shop in Washington, D.C. because he believed there was a Democratic-led child sex trafficking ring there. Obviously, there wasn't, but the lie was pushed by users of online messaging boards like 4chan and 8chan. Then, in 2017, one of those anonymous users named Q made their first post on 4chan. They claimed to be a government insider with information on Hillary Clinton's impending arrest, which never happened. But Q kept posting anyway and gained a following of Trump supporters who hung on every false claim and even started making some of their own. Claims like John F. Kennedy Jr. is still alive and will replace Mike Pence as President Trump's running mate, and that the president's enemies will be sent to Guantanamo Bay where they'll be executed. QAnon's core belief is that a group of politicians and celebrities are kidnapping and eating children, and President Trump is waging a secret war to stop them. Again, none of this is true. And you're probably thinking these conspiracy theories are so out there, why even give them attention? It's because QAnon is no longer just a fringe internet rumor. As you saw with Pizzagate, it's already causing real-world harm, and that's not the only incident. In 2018, a man was arrested on terrorism charges after he drove an armored truck filled with weapons over the Hoover Dam. He said he was motivated by a Q post. In 2019, a QAnon believer was charged with murdering a New York City crime boss that he claimed was part of a so-called deep state conspiracy against the president. The conspiracy theory has become so ingrained on Facebook and Twitter, they recently cracked down on groups and accounts that promote Q. That's why this summer the movement rebranded in an even more insidious way. Users started spreading the hashtag #SaveTheChildren and holding anti-child trafficking rallies in hundreds of cities across the country. But these weren't innocent rallies. Experts say this was a strategy to lure other people into the movement who wouldn't normally get caught up in conspiracies, but want to help fight child trafficking. And that's how we got here.
So, even after all the chaos and death on Capitol Hill, Congress eventually got back together in the wee hours of the morning, and they officially counted the electoral votes and affirmed President-elect Biden won. But not without some objection from some Republican lawmakers. There were challenges to the votes from both Arizona and Pennsylvania. None of the Oregon congressional delegates voted to uphold the Arizona objection, but different story when it came to the debate over the objection for the Pennsylvania votes. Oregon's newest member of Congress and our only Republican in the House, Cliff Bentz, voted to uphold that challenge. We reached out to him to ask why he supports that one and not the Arizona challenge. He hasn't gotten back to us yet, although he did explain his rationale to OPB today. He said he had concerns about some of the constitutional issues at stake in Pennsylvania and didn't have those same concerns in Arizona. Different story again when it comes to Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler of Southwest Washington. Not only did she vote against both objections, she passionately defended her vote on the House floor late last night.
I believe that there were problems in Pennsylvania and in Georgia, but the Constitution gives us the right to fix that at the state level, not throw out the Electoral College. We do not want to absolve the responsibility of the people in those states to hold their own lawmakers accountable. I, as a Washington State Congresswoman, don't know better than the people in Pennsylvania and Georgia. Folks, we can't vote to undermine the Electoral College today. We have to uphold it.
Jamie Herrera Butler, a Republican, of course. I think we might have put that she was a Democrat at the bottom of the screen, but she is, as you know, a Republican. As of last night's counting and affirmation of the electoral votes, there are now no other constitutional long shots that President Trump can hope to play out in his favor and swing this election in his direction. The only other thing the Constitution says about the election after this point is that the next president will be inaugurated on January 20th.
Pop quiz for you. Who do you think got the COVID-19 vaccine first in Oregon? A, teachers, B, dentists, or C, an OHSU marketing employee who is currently working from home? You can probably guess from my tone what the correct answer is when the story continues.
Welcome back to the story, which is now an insurrection-free zone. Okay, we got all our attack on D.C. coverage out of the way in our first segment of the show. If you'd like to take another look at that, you want to share it with somebody, it'll be up on our YouTube channel very soon. For now, we want to answer a viewer question, so please keep those coming as well using the hashtag HeyDan or emailing the story at kgw.com. We have a question from Patrick about Oregon's COVID vaccine rollout. Oh boy. All right. Patrick asked us, do you know why Providence is already vaccinating employees that are not frontline, like accounting staff that have been working from home? These are not OHA Priority 1A. Great question and great point, Patrick. And it might come as a surprise to some of the viewers who hear that and think, no way. Come on, no way an accountant is getting the vaccine before, say, a dentist or even a teacher. And it was Oregon's plan all along to vaccinate the healthcare workers before everybody else, right? But yes, there are people who aren't frontline healthcare workers, who are nowhere near that front line or this virus, who are getting shots before the people who are. And the Oregon Health Authority told our Kristen Severance they're not supposed to be.
As soon as the vaccines started in Oregon, so did the social media posts. People excited to be getting vaccinated, posting pictures of themselves. Then came the emails from people asking why an OHSU marketing employee was getting the vaccine or an administrator at Providence. Viewers wrote us asking, I just don't understand how people who are working from home have access to the vaccine before the true frontline workers or 30-somethings who are at no risk are getting vaccines while elderly, sick people wait and wait and wait. In a news conference this week, the Oregon Health Authority said what they thought was an isolated incident was more widespread.
We have become aware of vaccinators vaccinating staff going beyond the 1A category definitions.
OHA's Patrick Allen said that should not be happening.
Actually quite a bit more widespread. And so we're providing some very direct guidance out to vaccinators that we are still in category 1A and that we shouldn't be moving on to people who don't have patient exposure.
Federal guidelines adopted by the state of Oregon put people with direct contact with patients at the front of the line, but health systems were left to interpret the rules in their own way. And hospital systems were not hiding these vaccinations in any way. It was all part of OHSU's plan to vaccinate all employees in 6 waves. The employees in waves 1 to 5 had contact with patients. The employees in wave 6 did not. OHSU started vaccinating wave 6 on January 4th. Providence said they were following OHA guidelines from December 18th. pointing to a highlighted section stating healthcare personnel include but are not limited to EMS, nursing assistants, clerical, administrative, billing, and volunteer personnel. Providence said the administrator on social media had volunteered at a clinic for 8 hours at the end of December, welcoming and checking people in to be vaccinated. Legacy said they are only vaccinating patient-facing staff, not staff with outpatient contact. Kaiser said they are focused on frontline healthcare workers or first responders. And as for the VA Portland healthcare system, Director Garwin Goodspeed said they are vaccinating all employees and will continue with that plan.
Was the VA or is the VA giving the COVID vaccine to, employees who are not coming in contact with patients?
Yes, we are. The COVID vaccine is useless unless it's in someone's arm. So the vaccine sitting in a freezer doesn't help anyone. Many of our employees aren't direct patient facing, but they come into the hospital every single day.
The VA works closely with the OHA, but takes their cue from the federal government.
They're going to send out expanded guidance. Will the VA be changing the way they do things?
No, absolutely not. VA is following the guidance from VA. We partner with OHA very, very closely, but we're a federal entity. We respect their position and where they're going from a state perspective and figuring out how to cover as many people as they can. We have figured out how to get 80% of our patient-facing staff vaccinated.
And the Surgeon General, Dr. Jerome Adams, told NBC he feels states are actually too beholden to the guidelines, and states should be vaccinating as many people as possible.
So your headline today really should be Surgeon General tells states and governors to move quickly to other priority groups. If the demand isn't there in 1A, go to 1B and continue on down. And if the demand isn't there in one location, move those vaccines to another location.
Further proof, this entire vaccination process gets more muddled and confusing by the day.
Okay, Kristen Severance joining us now in studio. You can see how there is some outrage factor here. People waiting to get this vaccine feel like they need it, and then you have folks who are working from home who are getting it. But at the same time, we have federal officials and this demand from the public to get shots in people's arms.
Exactly. No one wants to see vaccines go to waste for any reason, but especially because the hospitals can't find people to vaccinate. I confirmed with Legacy Hospital today, they had to throw out 27 vials of the vaccine early on in the process because they said they could not find healthcare workers to vaccinate. So again, you don't want to see that happen. I think this story really shows just how all over the place this vaccination process really is.
Shows how important it is to have a plan.
Right.
Kristen, thank you.
You bet.
Now, if you missed any part of Kristen's story, you can find it and our entire show on the KGW YouTube channel, along with our special web-only show that we posted last night when NBC bumped us. We're not taking that personal. We are a little bit, but not really. While you're checking us out there, hopefully you like it enough to hit that subscribe button and keep coming back to check out some more of our content. And I hope when you come back here to check us out, finish the story, I'm going to read some comments. We'll see you then. Okay, let's talk comments. First one from Sheila Barker. She says, the riot has left me angry and anxious. Any idea on how to channel this energy? Some people write me really mean emails, call me names and stuff. I'm okay with it, and it seems to help, so you can try that. David W. Day, just about all of our coverages today, says, who cares? How do I get the darn vaccine? He didn't write darn. That's a great question. And I know that we're talking about a big story, but all the big stories we're talking about are always laid on top of the constant of this virus and the vaccine and all of that. So that is really where our focus is gonna be every single day. We're gonna keep these stories coming. We're gonna keep pressuring our leaders to make sure that this is done properly, can get people the information and the vaccine as quickly as possible. So if you have questions about the rollout, about the vaccine, questions like that one, if you want to use words like darn or even more extreme ones, send them our way. Use that hashtag, HeyDan. That's the story for tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.